If you grew up in the Philippines, you were taught that the ideal Pinay, the ideal Filipina woman, is Maria Clara. Mahinhin, modest, devoted, submissive, hindi makabasag pinggan ika nga. Delicate. And that is how it has always been for centuries. Now, if you grew up outside the Philippines, or if you've ever been online, the image of a Pinay is quite different, completely different. She's exotic, she's available, she's a fantasy you can purchase. In fact, if you type Pinay today in any search engine for the past decade or so, the top results are almost always flooded with ads of mail-order brides, dating sites, and yes, even actual porn sites. So just think about it. On one end, one says that you're too pure to have desires, while on the other end, one says that you only exist to fulfill somebody else's desires. Neither of them came from our ancestors. Neither of them came from our roots. But the thing is, when the Spaniards actually arrived in these islands, in our motherland, when they started describing what they had found, what they encountered, they described something completely different, a completely different reality, and they were not happy about it. Mabuhay! Or in Pampangan, luwid kayo. Welcome to my channel. It's me, Kirby Araullo, your friendly Pinoy historian. At dahil buwan ng kababaihan ngayong Marso sa Pilipinas at Women's History Month naman ngayon dito sa Amerika, in today's video, let's dig deeper and learn more about the pre-colonial women in what is now the Philippines. Halina't kilalanin natin ang mundo ng ating mga ninunong kababaihan. If you are new to my channel, I've actually been making videos about our people's histories, culture, and everything in between for about 14 years now. And actually, my first video about today's topic was over 11 years ago. And I've learned so much more since then. In fact, I even wrote an entire book on the fierce women of early Southeast Asia. So make sure to grab a copy after this video. Now, one thing worth knowing is that our ancestors didn't use the word Filipino, especially back then, to identify themselves. They were Kapampangan, Tagalog, Bisaya, Ilocano, Magindanaon, Tausug, Maranao, and over 100 other identities. The Filipino identity as we know it today did not yet exist. But for today's video, for simplicity, I'll be using Filipino, Filipina, or Pinay as general terms in this video, while also using specific ethnic names when appropriate. So without further ado, let's dig deeper. Growing up in the Philippines, I was surrounded by fierce women. In fact, I was raised by fierce women. But that is not the image most people have of the Filipina. Most Filipinos today grow up having this specific, very specific idea and image of what a Filipina should be, of what a good Pinay or an ideal woman should be. Mahinhin, modest, quiet, devoted to her husband, her family, and her faith. You don't talk back. You're not allowed to draw too much attention to yourself. You're not allowed to openly talk about your body and your desires. And if your marriage falls apart, then that is your fault. That is a source of shame, not just for you, but for your entire family. Ika nga nila sa Mulan, dishonor to your entire family, to your cow and your entire clan. So where exactly did this idea come from? And if I ask most people today, where that image comes from, they'd probably think of Maria Clara, the character from Jose Rizal's Noli Me Tangere, who became the template for the ideal Filipina for over a century. Modest, demure, mahinhin, self-sacrificing, and even prone to fainting. But the irony is that Jose Rizal wrote Maria Clara as a critique of colonial society, not as an ideal to follow. Filipino journalist and historian Carmen Guerrero Nakpil called her the greatest misfortune that has befallen the Filipina in the last 100 years. And Maria Clara didn't just stay in the novels. By the 1960s, the courts were using the Maria Clara doctrine, where a woman's credibility depended on how closely she matched the image of a Maria Clara, of a decent Filipina. And if you didn't fit that colonial ideal, if you didn't fit the Maria Clara image, you were easier to doubt. Suddenly you're the problem, not the victim. So in short, a fictional character from a colonial era novel became the legal standard for judging real Filipino women in Philippine courts for decades. Now today, the Philippines is the only country in the world, besides the Vatican City, where divorce remains illegal, except under Muslim law. And that is not because divorce is so un-Filipino. It is because the Spaniards legally abolished divorce practices that many of our indigenous ancestors had for centuries. Now, divorce was briefly restored under the Americans and even under the Japanese. But Filipinos made it once again illegal to divorce after independence. That is how deep the colonial mindset was. So the version of femininity that most Filipinos today grew up with didn't come from our ancestors. It came from the people who conquered our islands, who colonized the minds of our people. When we talk about women's rights in the Philippines today, people treat it like a modern conversation, a modern concept, and for some, something that is too woke. But the thing is, our ancestors were not working towards women's rights or gender equality because in fact, they already had it. And we know this because the colonizers themselves had to write it down. Unlike in other societies, women owned properties independently of their husbands, not before marriage and not after marriage. During the marriage, both spouses kept what was theirs and shared everything equally in anything they built together. Fray Juan de Plasencia, a Spanish friar sent to convert our ancestors, documented the property customs of both Tagalogs and Kapampangans. When a couple separated, all property acquired during the marriage was divided equally. Now, if the husband left, he lost the dowry. Now, if the wife left, she returned double the dowry, but still kept everything that was hers. And inheritance was also bilateral, meaning traced through both parents. And when divided, daughters inherited on equal footing with the sons. There was no gender bias. In Kapampangan, the dowry was called duru. In Tagalog, bigay kaya or bugay in the Visayas. Now, on top of the dowry, a separate payment went directly to the mother of the bride. In Kapampangan, we call this amas. In Tagalog, panghimuyat, and himiraw in the Visayas. Fray Diego Berganio documented that the Kapampangan amas had to be at least 1/3 or even half the value of the duru. It was always paid in silver or gold. The Jesuit Francisco Colin recorded panghimuyat as a compensation for the sleepless nights the mother spent raising her daughter and the breast milk she fed her. So all of this was standard practice across the islands. Now compare that to Europe at the same exact time. Under English law, the moment a woman married, her legal identity was absorbed into her husband's. She couldn't own property, she couldn't enter contracts, couldn't keep her own earnings. In fact, English women wouldn't get that right until 1882. Centuries behind what our ancestors had. Women dominated trade and markets across the islands. In fact, European visitors across Southeast Asia were surprised to find women outnumbering the men in the marketplaces. In Malacca, the Portuguese Tome Pires documented a thriving night market run exclusively by women. In the Visayas, women ran the stalls, set the prices, and controlled the flow of commerce at the local level. Now, Manila Bay was one of the most important trading hubs in all of Southeast Asia during this time. Lusong or Luzon held the monopoly of maritime trade with China. Just think about that. The mighty Ming Dynasty had officially closed their doors to maritime trade with the outside world. But Luzon or Lusong was one of the rare exceptions. And all of this happened under the reign of a woman, the legendary Dayang Kalangitan. So women operated at every level of this booming economy across our islands in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, from local markets to international diplomacy. Women were not side characters, they were the stars. And in fact, we're still seeing this in our cultures today. For example, when I was growing up in Pampanga, it was always the women who handled the money, regardless of who was making it. The women always had the final say in the family's resources. Unknown to many to this day, elements of matriarchy are still very strong in Kapampangan culture. But that could be a topic for another video. But for now, comment below if you see the same things in your family, in your cultures, in your backgrounds. I'd love to hear from you too. I'd love to learn from your own backgrounds. Now, if you grew up Filipino and Catholic, everything we were taught about marriage, about divorce, about what makes a woman respectable, all these rigid rules and expectations, none of that came from our indigenous ancestors. Sa madaling salita, hindi ito katutubong kultura sa Pilipinas. In pre-colonial Philippines, marriage was a partnership, an equal partnership. Unlike in other societies, the groom's family paid the bride's family, not the other way around. And if the marriage didn't work out, either spouse could walk away. In fact, at Visayan weddings, an elder would announce the terms publicly. If the husband becomes wayward and fails to support the wife, she can leave him, keep everything he gave, and marry another man. That was built into the ceremony itself. Early Spanish accounts noted that marriages last only so long as harmony prevails. For the slightest cause in the world, they divorce one another. Antonio de Morga recorded that if the separation was the husband's fault, he got nothing back, while women kept everything they brought into the marriage, plus an equal share of whatever was built during the marriage. Now, to put that into perspective, Henry VIII had to break with the entire Catholic Church and practically create a new religion, the Church of England, just so he can divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Pre-colonial Filipino women could leave a marriage whenever they wanted to and walk away with their property intact. and their legal rights protected. Now, sexual freedom before marriage was not just accepted, it was actually normal and expected. Women chose their own partners. Women went where they wanted to without needing permission from their husbands or their fathers. Their autonomy extended to their bodies, their desires, and even their pregnancies. But more on that later in the video. So in pre-colonial Philippines, women had genuine agency over consent, marriage, and family life, and their own bodies. And the colonizers who documented all of this were not happy about it. The ancient Pinay had all of it. Our women ancestors had property rights, properties, trade, marriage, divorce, bodily autonomy, and everything in between. But the thing is, their power goes even deeper than that, beyond the household. Because women didn't just, navigate or move within ancient societies. They shaped it, they led, they governed, and they held the highest spiritual authority in our islands. In fact, the Spaniards documented this extensively, not because they admired it, but because they saw women as one of the biggest obstacles to conquering our islands, to conquering our people. So ano nga ba ang ikinatakot ng mga Kastila sa ating mga ninunong kababaihan? What exactly made them afraid? The Babaylan in the Visayas, the Catalonan in Tagalog, and the Mamaluyan among Kapampangans, they were the highest spiritual authorities in their communities. They communed with the Anitos, the Diwatas, they healed the sick, led rituals, and presided over every major ceremony. In Kapampangan tradition, the Mamaluyan were the vessels of the gods, while the Catalonan communicated through visions and dreams. Plasencia recorded the Catalonan in 1589, alongside an entire hierarchy of spiritual leadership. The friars documented them extensively because they saw them as the single greatest threat to Christianization. You don't document something that carefully unless you're trying to understand what you need to destroy. And not all Babaylans were women. The Asog in the Visayas and the Bayugin in Luzon were men who fully embodied femininity and served as Babaylan in their own right. In fact, they could marry men, a form of same-sex marriage already being practiced in what is now the Philippines. Across Southeast Asia, femininity was not lesser. It was the gateway to the most sacred authority in society. The Babaylan validated the Datus or Dalacan's right to rule. Without their blessing, a ruler's authority could be questioned or invalidated entirely. When a Datu died without a clear successor, the Babaylan could step in as interim leader, and no ruler could go to war without the Babaylan's blessing and the consent of the people. Unknown to many, succession in the Philippines was not based on gender. It was based on merit. In Kapampangan, luwalu, the virtue of championing the well-being of the most vulnerable, was fundamental to being a ruler. For example, Kalangitan reigned as the paramount ruler of Luzon or Luzon, not a consort, but the ruler. Her daughter Panginwan ruled multiple kingdoms alongside her husband, as an equal, not lesser. Her daughter-in-law Maria succeeded her husband as the ruler of Maynila and maintained peace and stability in the kingdom. Women were also on the battlefield, serving as warriors and military commanders across the islands. In fact, female military leadership was far more common across Southeast Asia than most people realize. And that is a topic for a future video, so stay tuned. What if none of this was accidental? What if the power that women had in pre-colonial Philippines was not random at all? I mean, everything we talked about today, the property rights, the bodily autonomy, the trade, the divorce, the Babaylans, the women rulers, and everything in between, none of that was in isolation. All of that came from the same underlying worldview. Ang lahat ng ito ay nagmula sa iisang ugat, sa iisang pananaw at pangunawa sa ating lipunan at daigdig. Our ancestors traced their descent through both parents, aka bilateral kinship, not patrilineal. Daughters inherited on equal footing with the sons. When society is built around the idea that both parents matter equally, there is no structural reason to value sons over daughters, or for women to disappear into their husband's family. That equality was not a collection of progressive policies. It was inherent in our indigenous cultures. In fact, our indigenous languages reflected it. In Kapampangan, Tagalog, Kalinga, and so many others, across the Philippines, the word for son, daughter, and child was the same. Anak, gender neutral. Even titles like Datu, Lakan, Raja, and Ginu, and so many others are also inherently gender neutral. There was not even a specific word for virginity. Dalaga simply meant a young woman of marriageable age, whether or not she had been in bed with someone. When a language doesn't build gender or shame into its words, this tells us something about how our ancestors saw the world, how their society functioned. Pre-colonial literacy was actually equal between men and women. Antonio Pigafetta documented an all-female orchestra in Cebu in 1521. In fact, women dominated storytelling and cultural production across the islands. Visayan women adorned their hands with tattoos, so beautiful that the Spaniards said they looked like the mask embroidery. They even wore multiple gold earrings in each ear. The Jesuit Pedro Chirino documented that women bathed freely at any hour, and that even a woman who had just given birth went straight to the river to bathe. There was no shame attached to their bodies or to their desires. Women decided how many children they wanted to have, including the right to end a pregnancy. Not the husbands and not the father, the women. In fact, pregnancy, childbirth, and reproductive health were in the hands of the Babaylan, in the care of fellow women. Chirino documented all of this in 1604 with clear disapproval, arguing that the Catholic Church needed to intervene. But in doing so, Chirino left us one of the clearest records of what life was like before they changed it. Pre-colonial women had real agency, genuine agency. Women's bodies were not something to be controlled or shamed. They were respected. Their bodies belonged to them, the women. What our ancestors had was not some, early experiment or accident. It wasn't some woke agenda from the past. This was a fully developed system, a fully developed society that thrived for centuries. And in many ways, our world today still has not caught up to what our ancestors already had. So what exactly happened? This gender-inclusive and egalitarian society did not just fade away into oblivion. It was systematically dismantled, deliberately dismantled. Ang lahat ng ito ay hindi naglaho ng parang bula. Ito'y pilit ibinaon sa limot. So they went after the Babaylan first. They demonized them as evil witches and agents of the devil. They persecuted them violently. They literally fed Babaylans to crocodiles. The Asog and the Bayugin were targeted with particular viciousness. And then the friars installed themselves in the Babaylan's place, an exclusively male Catholic priesthood, replacing a spiritual hierarchy once dominated by women and gender-fluid people for centuries. Catholic marriage was imposed as the only legitimate union. Divorce was abolished. Women's property rights were restructured. A married woman's assets came under her husband's control. The free and equal partnership-based marriage system was replaced with an institution where the wife was subordinate by law. Sexual freedom was criminalized. Virginity became a huge deal. Colonial schools systematically trained Filipino women into European gender roles. Women were barred from political leadership, and the reduction policy relocated indigenous communities into centralized towns built around the church under direct surveillance of the parish priest. By the end of the 1600s, Christianity had spread through most of the islands, except in the Sulu Archipelago and Mindanao. Within roughly 150 years, the entire gender system of the most populated islands was overwritten. Every institution, spiritual, legal, economic, political, all of it were targeted simultaneously. But Filipinos were not passive victims. They resisted, they adapted, and negotiated. And what emerged was not a clean replacement. Filipinos took what was imposed, reshaped it, blended it with what they already knew, and built something new. Much of that colonial system remains in effect today. But not everything was erased, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But the Americans had a different playbook. They didn't make Filipinas into saints. They turned Pinays into commodities. So I grew up a block away from Fields Avenue, the infamous red light district in Angeles City. As in sa kabilang kanto lang talaga. Clark Air Base was just down the street. So at a young age, I saw with my own eyes how this system exploited our people, under those dancing neon lights. When the US colonized the Philippines after a brutal war, they built some of the largest overseas military bases in the world on our islands. Clark Air Base in Pampanga and Subic Bay in Zambales. And around those bases, an entire economy was built on the bodies of Filipino women. An estimated 55,000 to 60,000 women and girls were in the so-called entertainment industry around Clark and Subic alone. The sex industry exploded during the Vietnam War, and it never stopped. The mail-order bride industry took off in the 1970s and the 80s, marketing Filipino women using the same exact colonial stereotypes: docile, submissive, exotic. Thousands of Filipino women were advertised in catalogs and websites as products for sale. Scholars estimate that 300,000 to 500,000 Filipino women left through that industry. To this day, if you type Pinay into a search engine, the top results are almost always flooded with ads of dating sites, mail-order brides, and yes, even porn sites. That is not just the algorithm. That is the legacy of a system that turned Filipino women into commodities sold for Western consumption. When the bases closed down in 1991, the industry didn't just leave with the soldiers. It just changed clientele, and then it went global. Growing up in the 90s, our streets were, swarming with foreign men, exploiting women, queer folks, and yes, even children. Many of the kids of these exploited women were actually my childhood playmates. We grew up together. We learned at a very young age what exploitation looked like, up close, and it changed how I understood the world around us. And the thing is, the violence of this system has never stopped. Remember the Asog and the Bayugin, the trans Babaylans of our ancestors. In 2014, Jennifer Laude, a trans Filipino woman, was killed by U.S. Marine Joseph Scott Pemberton in a motel in Olongapo City, right next to the old Subic Naval Base. The charge against him was downgraded from murder to homicide. Pemberton served less than 6 years before Duterte granted him an absolute pardon, and he was flown out on a U.S. military plane. He left a free man. In the world of our ancestors, trans women were highly revered and highly respected spiritual leaders. In the world the colonizers built, a trans Filipino woman was killed by a foreign soldier in a system that treated her life as worth less than justice. The Spaniards told Filipino women to be saints, while the Americans told the world that Pinay women were for sale. Just think about it. One made Filipinas invisible, while the other put Pinays on display. Two colonizers, two different ways of stripping away humanity from Filipino women. So, between the Spaniards and the Americans, that is over 400 years of dismantling everything that our ancestors built. But the thing is, in reality, not all of it actually disappeared. A lot of it survived. In the communities that were never fully colonized, women's rights were never lost at all. From the Ibaloy of Benguet, the Tagbanwa of Palawan, the Cancanay and Bontoc of the Cordilleras, the Monoban Blaan of Mindanao, these communities still practice customary divorce to this day. The indigenous Lumad of Mindanao maintained their Babaylan and Baylan traditions, unbroken through the centuries. These are living traditions that were never erased. And in the colonized communities, resistance started from the very beginning. Babaylans were at the center of anti-colonial uprisings throughout the 1600s and the 1700s. Among others, this included the Tamblot Revolt in Bohol and the Bancao Revolt in Leyte. In fact, into the 1800s, Papa Isyo led Babaylan-inspired revolts in Negros against both the Spaniards and the Americans. So women in Babaylan were targeted precisely because they represented the power that colonial system needed to destroy. And that same power made women and Babaylans natural leaders of resistance. And what they couldn't practice openly, they hid in plain sight. Elements of Babaylan traditions were woven into Filipino Catholicism, not by accident, but a deliberate act of preservation. So for example, spirit possessions like sinasapian in Tagalog, luluguran in Kapampangan, nasudlan in Bisaya, all of this have roots in pre-colonial traditions and continues in folk Catholicism today. Even the albularyo can trace their roots and lineage back to the Babaylan. In fact, unknown to many, the indigenous Kapampangan Kulitan script survived because culture bearers, especially the Mamaluyan and the Katulunan, kept using the script to communicate with the spirit world, with the spirits of our ancestors. So in short, Kulitan never died. And beyond the spiritual realm, women still manage household finances and businesses across the Philippines. Most Filipino families today still practice bilateral kinship, tracing family through both parents. The economic partnership between spouses that Placencia documented did not disappear, even under centuries of colonialism. And modern-day Babaylan practitioners are still very active across the Philippines and even throughout the diaspora. Women fighting for indigenous rights, environmental justice, and human rights. Women have also remained powerful figures in public life, from grassroots organizing to both local and national politics. Filipinas continue a tradition of women's leadership that colonialism tried to end, but couldn't. Today, the Philippines still ranks among the most gender-equal countries in the entire world. In fact, one of the highest in Asia. But the reality is that Filipino women today are still fighting for the basic rights that our ancestors already had. So if you think about it, that ranking tells us that something survived. But it also tells us how much work is still needed. Kaya kung tutuusin ay maraming mahahalagang mga aral ang makikita at mapupulot mula sa ating kasaysayan, mula sa karunungan at halimbawa ng ating mga ninuno. Kung tutuusin ay napakarami pa rin natin kailangang ipaglaban para sa karapatan ng ating mga minamahal na kababaihan. Filipinas today still have no legal right to divorce, no matter how painful or unsafe their marriages may be. It took 14 years just to pass the reproductive health law, and even now, people are still trying to roll it back. And gender-based violence remains one of the most ignored and underreported crises in the country. In fact, just days ago, during Women's Month, a sitting congressman used an official hearing to publicly fantasize and sexualize a celebrity, Ann Curtis, and then he tried to frame all of it as a compliment. His remarks were eventually stricken from record, but the fact that a lawmaker felt very comfortable saying something like that publicly in an official government proceeding tells you how far we still have to go. These are the consequences of centuries of colonialism that told Filipino women they are too pure to have power, but then told the world that the Pinay women were too exotic to be treated as humans. And every time a Filipina stands up and demands better, she's actually continuing something our ancestors started centuries ago. The Babaylan did not disappear, and the fierce feminism of our ancestors did not disappear. They remained the healers, the activists, the women who refused to be silent. And we know all of this, not just from the colonial records, but also from our very own traditions, passed down through generations. So think about your lola, your mother, your ate, your sister, your cousins, your tita. Think about the women who actually held our families and our communities together. So when someone tells you that the fight for women's rights in the Philippines is just another imported idea from the West, or that, if someone insists that fighting for gender equality is too woke, or just another liberal woke propaganda, well, now you know better. Fighting for women's rights and gender equality in our societies is not asking for something new. We're merely reclaiming what was taken from our people, from our ancestors. Sa madaling salita, ay ibinabalik at pinapalawak lang natin ang mga karapatang matagal lang taglay ng ating mga ninuno. Kung tutuusin, ito ay pagbibigay galang at pagbibigay pugay sa likas at taglay na lakas at dangal ng ating mga kababaihang Pilipina. And that is it for me today. But let me know in the comments below what you would like to see covered in my next video and in my next book, Forgotten Kingdoms of the Sea, Demystifying the Islands we now call the Philippines. In fact, stay tuned for our Kickstarter launching very soon. Maraming salamat po. Or in Pampangan, dakal pong salamat kay Hongan, and in Ilocano, agyaman naklaunay. See you next time, mga Tagalog kita kids, and in Pampangan, Bikitiks, and in Binisaya, kita aita.